guys? It's professional surfer Lakey Peterson. Join me today as I show you how to wax a surfboard. Here's some pro tips on getting the best wax job for your new board. Okay, so why do we wax a board? The reason we wax a board is obviously to make it sticky and grippy, and to have a little bit of something in between your body and the actual surfboard. This allows us, when we pop up and we're actually surfing, our feet are going to stick to the board well. We're not going to slip, possibly injure ourselves. Wax is essential to have, whether you're on a soft top or a hard board like this, you need it. Okay, the other question commonly asked is when you wax a board. So obviously if you get a brand new board, like I have here, you're going to wax the board, you're going to put a base coat on it, which we'll dive into, and then another coat on it for when you go surf. But then beyond that, you're gonna wax it probably every time before you go surfing from here on out with just one layer of wax. So one big layer at the beginning and then a little bit each time before you paddle out. So this is the confusing part. What wax should you use? Now, there are a variety of different wax companies out there. The biggest ones that you might see in surf shops are Sex Wax, Sticky Bumps, Foo Wax, just to name a few. So it can get really confusing, especially if you're new to surfing. One that I would recommend as a staple, it's gonna work good for the rest of the time, has worked good since the beginning of the time, is Sex Wax. I'm not a sponsored athlete of Sex Wax. I just believe in the product. I've used it my whole life. It's reliable. It's a great one to start with, no matter what level you're at. And I'll give you a little secret tip later on, so stay tuned with another little tiny wax job I use before I surf. Okay, so now that we've identified the type of wax that we're gonna use, if you can't get your hands on Sex Wax, use whatever your local surf shop has. But depending on what climate you're surfing in, obviously the temperature is gonna change. I'm currently in California, so I'm gonna use a certain type of wax, and then next week I go to Hawaii, I'm gonna use a different type of wax there. So the hotter and warmer the water is that you're surfing in, the harder you need your wax to be, so it doesn't get smudgy and gooey and you start slipping all over the place. If it's colder, you need a little bit softer wax so that it doesn't feel too rock solid and you're slipping all over the place there. So, all right, so we're gonna break it up into 3 different groups of what type of wax to use and when. What I would use for number 1, tropical, is my base coat is gonna be Blue Label Sex Wax. This is the first coat I'll put down on my surfboard. Only one big coat of it, and then I'm gonna top that with red. And every time before I go surf, I'm gonna use Red Label. Moving on to climate number 2, California in the summertime, it's a little bit chilly. What I would do for a base coat is Red Label for my base coat. I'd put this down, the very first one I put down is Red Label Sex Wax. And then over the top of that, I'm gonna put down a little bit of orange. That's gonna be a really great combo for California in the summertime. Climate number 3 is California wintertime. If you live somewhere really, really cold, what you're gonna do is do still Red Label for your base coat. This is kind of a good overall base coat for any climate, really. And then I would use, and what I'm using right now because it's winter time here, Purple Label. This is a softer wax, so it's gonna stay on a lot better and be a lot grippier in that really, really cold water. Every single wax brand will usually have something on the side that will tell you what that color wax is made for. So this one you can see, it's for warm water. It gives you kind of the water temp that it's probably gonna work good in. So have a look on the side of the wax label, and that can also tell you kind of what to use it for. Okay, so let's get into the fun part now, which is waxing our board like a pro. All right, so let's get into it. Step number 1, we are in California. It's wintertime and cold, so I'm gonna use a Red Label for my base coat. I have a nice brand new Channel Island surfboard here. Now, remember that base coat is actually really, really important to use. Some people may not think that it's important or does anything, but it sets your whole board up to make sure your wax job's gonna work really well and last a lot longer. So make sure you follow along the exact steps that I'm doing here to make sure you have the best wax job possible. All right, so we're gonna start with our base coat, and this technique, yes, I have a technique name, is called the diamond technique. That's what we've named it, because we're gonna kind of try and keep our lines about 2 to 3 inches or 5 to 6 centimeters apart. It's nice to keep everything kind of similarly spaced out. It'll make your wax job a lot better. Okay, so we're gonna start off with our base coat. Try and put it on a little bit of an angle to give you more of a distinct line, which in turn is gonna make it a better pattern and more grippy for you. So we're gonna add a fair bit of pressure. Line number 1, we'll go over these a few times after. We're gonna do this kind of all the way up our board. Remember, keeping them similar distance. And we want to go, make sure you're waxing high enough. A lot of people think it's not cool to wax high on their board, but I find it necessary. We don't want to be slipping. And nice, that's a perfect first layer. And now, again, it's called the diamond technique. So what we're gonna do, we're gonna start over here. We're gonna go opposite direction with our lines. So everything is gonna look like a little diamond pattern across the board. And we're gonna cross it up. So make sure, again, you're pressing down nice and firm. Perfect. So you should have what kind of is looking like a little bit of a diamond pattern along your board for this first little bit. Okay, so now we have our diamonds down on the board. We're gonna go to step number 2 here. This time we're gonna use more like the flatter part of the wax, where for those diamonds, we wanna use the newer part, the sharp edges. You can tell that's where I just did that. Now we can kind of go to this part. Okay, so to make this really simple and effective, we're gonna break your wax job into quarters. So 1, 2, 3, and 4. And how we're gonna do this, starting on top of our diamond pattern we already have. We're gonna take your first quarter of the board. We're gonna go 10 strokes. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and then move over to the side slightly. We're gonna go another 10 vertical right there. You'll see small bumps starting to form. And then we're gonna go again once more on this quarter to finish it off for 10 nice, light, easy strokes. And we'll finish each quarter vertically here, and then we'll move on to the next section where we're gonna go horizontally. So now that we've done this quarter vertically, let's go to the next quarter. So we're gonna 10. So now we've got the diamonds, now we've done vertical in all 4 of our quarters. It's time to cross that up and go horizontal. That's gonna create these little nodules, which in turn is gonna help you grip your surfboard a lot better. So let's go back to our first quarter that we started with, and we're just gonna do the same thing, but we're gonna do it back and forth, rail to rail. We're gonna go 10 strokes, then move over a tab. We're gonna go another 10, 10, okay, so as you might be able to tell on my board, and hopefully on your board, you're starting to see those little nodules form, which is exactly what we want. A little note here is if you're in the tropics, sometimes this can be a little bit harder for the wax to actually start forming this. So one tip I would say is to do it in an air-conditioned or cooler room, so it's not just melting and smudging as you're putting it on. Or you might have to just do a couple more layers of this than you might need to do, say, in California where it's already quite cold. Okay, so moving on to our last step with base coat. Remember, we're still using the base coat here. We want to keep forming our little nodules, mini mountains. We do this part, we kind of want to use this nice edgy part of the wax that should be formed on your wax now after you've waxed the board a little bit. So this part here is what we want to get into while we do these little circular motions. It's going to grab really easy on the nodules, and it's going to help create that perfect look that we're going for. And remember to go really nice and light, tiny little circles, ovals, however you want to do it. And the key here is to not press too hard. If you press down too hard, it's going to start to smudge it and make the nodules go away. We don't want to do that. We want to just lightly go over the top of it in nice little circles and create those nodules to grow into mini mountains. Little circles. Give attention to all the little areas that need ironing out. There might be some parts of it that need a little bit more, and then some parts of it that don't need quite as much. Remember, don't push down too hard. Okay, so as you can see, we have some really nice mini mountains that have formed here. I tend to like being a little bit more generous on the base coat. Other people might not totally agree, but it is to my belief that if you have a really solid base coat, that's gonna make your wax job just last longer and be better. So this is how I would suggest doing it, and I think it looks the best. Now it's time for the top coat layer of wax. So we've moved on from the base coat. I'm gonna go ahead and use purple. We're here in California, it's nice and cold right now. For this layer, we just wanna use a tiny little bit. We don't want to use too much. It's also a lot softer, so it's going to smudge a lot easier than that base coat is. So we don't want to press down too hard once again. I like to use this edge of the wax. When you get into it, I just think it helps it from not smudging too much. It's the best part. We're going to do this again, break it up into quarters. And this is kind of going to be that small little circular motion within each quarter and then move through it. Lighter wax here, we're gonna go light with the hand and not too much of it, just a nice, small, smooth top layer to give it that perfect amount of stick that we're kind of looking for. And really, don't press down too hard when you're doing this one. If you press down too hard, it is gonna smudge. And we should only need to do kind of one little layer of this, and you are good to go. Okay, I'm gonna give you guys a little secret tip. I use this before I surf, always before I surf a heat. It's almost a superstition now, but it works really good. Also, some places where you have to walk over rocks, it can make the bottoms of your feet really slimy. So I actually will take my wax, I'll take my purple layer or whatever my top coat of wax is, and I will put wax right here on the top part of my foot. On both feet, I'll wax a little bit there, and then a little bit there. And then as I'm paddling out, I'll actually rub the bottom of this foot on the top of this foot so I get wax on the bottom of my feet. And I'll do that as I'm paddling out. And it just puts a little bit of wax on the bottom of my feet so I don't have any gunk or goo or slippery stuff that could be on the bottom of my feet. So that's a little trick for you guys if you want to be extra sticky. My last little tip or trick is something called foo wax. This wax is a company from Brazil, but they sell it here in the US now. And I'm not gonna put it on because I'm not surfing today, but this wax is incredibly sticky, and it's really important you get the perfect type of wax for the water temperature you're using. But I'll put usually just a tinge of this right over my top layer of wax just before I paddle out, just a little bit, and it is insanely grippy. Thank you so much for watching, you guys. I really hope you learned something today and you enjoyed it. If you have any questions, please leave a comment below and I'll make sure that I answer them for you. If you want to see how to take wax off of your surfboard, please hit this video here. I'll do a full breakdown of how to do that perfectly as well. Please hit that like button and subscribe, and we will see you next week.